There you go. Again, if you guys aren't here, I record all the lessons. They will be up for you on Canvas. You just got to look at the date. I go in chronological order through the module. So if you're here, great. But if you're not here for some reason, I'll have the video lesson up ready to go. So last week I had you turn into bell ringers. So I just came around and check them in here. Make sure you have them dated, have them close together. Okay, have them close together. Caroline, you're doing a good job with your bell ringers. I like that, the way it looks. They're all right there for me to look at real quick, and I can move on to the next person. Answer in detail. So reminder, answer in detail. Write down the full question. Okay, these questions will pop up later on a test. If you're not answering in detail, I can't give you full credit for it. Anybody go to the football game? Yeah? Oh, dang, we were up early. All part. What line? You ready to answer this? Chris? While I talk? Oh, that's right. I forgot about the party. I don't know. I think you should, right? I think you should.
Is he?
Yeah, I think he made that, so you better hold on.
We made that whole video in response just to get trained. Not in the beginning. Yeah, early. There's still 3/4 of football left.
What's that?
We still have the final.
Yeah.
This is what's up there.
Did you see the whole game? Oh, really?
Yeah.
The
band left.
I was up in the press box. How are they go out though?
I had to carry all the shoe things up, help with that, but I also carried my itchy up, so I was like running back and forth the entire time.
Oh, serious, man, too. So you got double duty.
Yeah.
Everything.
But we had a touchdown, and I play with the band, do the cheer, play with the band, do the cheer.
All right, hey, reminder, Amelia Austin tournament for Friday, okay? You remember how to do it? Okay, Austin, I'll show you. So just on the bottom of the homepage, you see current event, you click on the link, it'll take you to the Google form, you find an article that you'd like to inform everybody about, try to relate it to class here. That'd be awesome. I gave you a current event Friday, if you don't remember about it. All right, here we go. I think everybody's finished up here. So why do you think historians divide the Middle Ages into 3 smaller parts? Why do you think they divide them into 3 parts? Go ahead, Chris.
The Middle Ages took place for a long period.
Yeah, they did, right? They did. And the start of it happened what? What empire fell? Yeah, good job. Fall of the Roman Empire. And that first part of the Middle Ages is called the early Middle Ages. So if you guys want to put that, that would be great. Early Middle Ages. All right, we'll go over notes here soon, so we will be talking about it as well in the notes, but I think it's important to have it in 2 locations, and then you know what, that might be coming up here on the test. So the early Middle Ages. And a lot of people call this a dark period, the dark dark ages because, well, there was a loss of a lot of innovation. Okay, the Roman Empire brought a lot of innovation, a lot of new ideas, principles to the world, and it seemed like it was just lost. And the reason for it is because the fall of the Roman Empire, a lot of these barbarian groups, these Germanic-speaking tribes, they took down the Roman Empire, which brought on just a lack of innovation. Okay, there's really no protection for the people in Europe. Okay, that hierarchy just kind of fell apart. Okay, this leadership where we had elected representatives, which was far beyond really the time period, they just disappeared. Right, and that brought on what? That brought on what? It was a term I had you define last week, starts with an F. Go ahead, Lana. Feudalism, yep, good job. Feudalism. And what is feudalism? What does that mean? Go ahead, Paul.
I don't remember. It's like a hierarchy.
Yeah, okay, good job, good job. It's that social hierarchy that we just talked about. We have the king at the top, the lord's vassals, the knights, the peasants, and the serfs. Today we'll be talking about a different form of hierarchy that emerges right around the late, early Middle Ages, moving into the high Middle Ages, okay? And that's gonna be something known as the clergy, okay? And that's gonna be more of a church entity, a religious entity that guides all the kingdoms throughout Western Europe. So we'll talk about that here soon. All right, so then we have the High Middle Ages. The High Middle Ages. What do we think's going on here in the High Middle Ages? So we talked about feudalism quite a bit last week. What about High Middle Ages? Paul, go ahead.
It sounds like a peak.
Yeah, awesome. Yep, good job. So this hierarchy, this system was working pretty well at protecting the people in these kingdoms, right? So as protection was beginning to flourish, as people were seeking protection in these feudal systems all throughout Western Europe, these kingdoms, what is this going to start? What is this going to create in Europe? Modern day what? Where people are flowing to these areas. Go ahead, Paul.
Like countries, cities.
Yeah, cities. Yep, good job. So these are creating your modern day cities. Good work. Good work. And this is causing, it's a term, urbanization. You guys know what urbanization is? Yeah, so this is a flow of people to one location. And in this case, yeah, you get resources. Yeah, you have materials. Yeah, you have a position. But for the most part, you have protection, right? Good, good. And then eventually, we'll talk about here soon enough, the Renaissance era is coming to fruition right around this time. Like I mentioned, the church is becoming big. So clergy, the Pope, he has a lot of decision making. A lot of these kingdoms have to follow the will of the church. Okay, and this is going to lead to a lot of wars called the Crusades. You guys ever hear the Crusades before? Yeah. Okay. Good. So we'll talk about that towards the end of this chapter. All right, and finally, you have the late Middle Ages. The late Middle Ages. What's going on here? What's going on here? The late Middle Ages. So this is moving up to the 1400s or so. Go ahead, Paul.
Like I would say the downfall.
Yeah, it's coming to a decline, right? Okay, these absolute monarchies are taking power. There becomes a lot of issues with the church. Okay, a lot of people are starting to look at it as more of a corrupt entity and how they're guiding a lot of these kingdoms. The Crusades, they kill a lot of people. There's a lot of deaths and a lot of really decline in numbers and just really ideas when it comes to the late Middle Ages. So this is the decline. And also there's something that happens which causes a huge amount of deaths throughout Europe during this period. Does anybody know what that was? Austin, go ahead. Yeah, good job. Black Plague. Yeah. And this is going to lead right into what we call the Age of Exploration eventually with absolute monarchies, the Renaissance we'll talk about, and we'll also talk about the Reformation. All right, is there any questions here on this bell ring? All right, good. Here are your terms for today. Here are your terms. So remember, write these terms down at the end of the chapter. I'm going to have an assignment for you where you're going to have to attach these terms. So this is what we have so far. Okay, I think we finished with thief, right? Yeah, okay. So these are the sections here I'd like to talk about. We just discussed early Middle Ages. We talked about the High Middle Ages, and we already talked about the late Middle Ages. Today we're going to talk about a manor, also a word. So tomorrow, okay, this is gonna lead into our lesson tomorrow. We're gonna talk about medieval manors, castles. Okay, and I'll have an assignment where you work with your kingdom to create your own manor. You can try to design it much like these castles and medieval designs. And at the same time, you're gonna come up with a crest for your kingdom. So we'll talk about that here soon enough. What's up? Yeah, go ahead. Bless you. Does anybody need a little bit more time? Okay, no problem, no problem. All right, okay, so we already talked about these time periods really of the Middle Ages, these types of the Middle Ages that are broken down into three different parts. Okay, and let's talk about the manor. What is a manor? What is a manor? Real quick, we'll move on right after. So I'll show you pictures of manors then, and how many people during that time, peasants, knights, you name it, okay, where they live in the manor, what their roles are. We kind of already mentioned that, but why? Go ahead. Chris, yeah, Chris is gonna lie. Yeah, yeah. All right, good, good. So during the Middle Ages, okay, you have your castle right in the middle. For the most part, this is fortified, this is protected, and your higher class, your king, your lords, let's say, are living in these sections here. And obviously, they're heavily protected. There's fortifications all around this manor. And then within inside, you'll have different forms of craftsmen. There'll be a lot of these stores, a lot of these areas where people can go and buy goods and pay for services, let's say. And then on the outskirts of the manor, you have the fields that are supplying food. That's where you'll find the peasants and the serfs. Okay, and I'll show you a picture of that here soon enough. Clary, what do we have? Alana, go ahead. Yeah, good job. So this is a social hierarchy in a way, a hierarchy of power within the Middle Ages that many of the kingdoms in Western Europe followed. Okay, you have the Holy Roman Empire. Okay, the Pope is at the head. And he's going to lead a lot of these kingdoms to many different wars called the Crusades. And if you didn't abide by the religion, if you didn't abide by the Pope, well, if you're a king, chances are you're not going to be king for too long. It just goes to show how religion really took hold and had a lot of power during this time period. All right, so let's move on to the notes here. Some of this is review, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. And we'll move right to some of the topics that are a little bit newer. All right, so we talked about this already within the bell ringer. Okay, so I don't have to focus on this too much, but we have the early Middle Ages. So if you want to put a time period by it, that'd be great. So we got 400 to around 900. So AD, CE, whatever you want to put down there for that. So the early Middle Ages, this is right after the fall of the Roman Empire. And, well, this is where we see feudalism take hold. High Middle Ages, around 900 to 1250. Okay, so this is where church is really becoming big into people's lives. So this hierarchy that I'm just about to talk about with the Pope, okay, moving down to the cardinals, the bishops, okay, so on and so forth, we'll mention here soon enough. That is this time period. The Crusades are starting right around this, and this is the holy wars that are occurring. And this is bringing on a lot of urbanization. So many people are moving to these manors, moving to these areas, which we know eventually as the cities. Late Middle Ages, so 1250 to 1500. Okay, this is a lot of issues emerging when it comes to the Black Plague, when it comes to a lot of the problems, the issues with the church. And a lot of these kingdoms are starting to separate themselves a little bit from the church rule, the Holy Roman Empire. All right, so again, we already talked about it. We discussed it. I just wanted you to really write down some of these dates here to kind of put it in perspective. All right, you guys good with that? What's up, buddy? Okay, all right. If I am moving here just because of time's sake, if you miss something, remember you can find the video lesson on campus, okay? So you can go back to the video lesson, find where we're at, and write down some of that important material and information. Remember, I will be checking notes, so make sure you write notes down. What's up, Wyatt? You can talk, go ahead. You have your hand up? Oh, I thought you were asking a question. Oh, okay. You got it, Batista? All right, perfect. All right, chivalry. We already talked about chivalry, but this is a code of conduct here, a code of ethics that many of the knights, many of these higher levels in hierarchy follow. And for the most part, this is where you're showing honor, courtesy, okay, courage when it comes to battle, and protection of the higher classes in medieval society. So for the most part, this falls on the knight. But in any case, this is a code of ethics that many of the
really social statuses within this time the Middle Ages had to follow. So if you're a peasant, if you're a serf, you're not speaking out, right? You're not expressing your voice when it comes to decision making. You just got to find your role. Okay, you got to fit your role and not try to look to expand. But in other words, I'm sure many people, I'm sure you heard that. Oh, is chivalry dead? Well, maybe if you don't hold open a door for, let's say, your girlfriend if you're going on a date, right, Wyatt?
Oh,
Huh?
not me.
Yeah, you're gonna let them open the door for themselves, right? Oh, so no dates for you then? Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, anyway.
Jeez, okay, all right. So
Hold the door, equal rights.
you're gonna slam the door.
You want to be.
All right, so again, we talked about chivalry. Okay, we talked about how this was a kind of code of ethics for many of the people, but specifically knights during the Middle Ages. All right, I'm going to move on here. You guys already have this definition. If you want to take a picture of this, you can. This is really a good guide when it comes to note taking, but I trust you to write your notes accordingly. But I thought this was something that was a good guide when it comes to note taking. But if you don't want to do it, you don't want to take a picture of it, that's fine. I'm going to move on. All right, so moving on here, early 6th century, these kingdoms. Okay, this is what we have. This is what we have. So this is the fall of the Roman Empire. Okay, I didn't talk about it much, but the Byzantine Empire, this is focused on the eastern part of Europe, moving into the Middle East, modern day Turkey, moving down into what we know as the Mediterranean Sea. Okay, this is what's really left over of the Roman Empire. Okay, so they stick around for a period of time. And there is some innovation, there is some growth. Okay, but for the most part, this is what's to the left of the Roman Empire. In Western Europe, this is where we see feudalism. This is where we see the kingdoms that are emerging that we're talking about, this Middle Age, the Middle Ages that we're discussing and mentioning. So the feudalism, the social hierarchy, a lot of these kingdoms that are forming here in Western Europe, that's where this is taking place. Okay. Here's Western Europe. We're going to talk specifically here about the Franks here soon and how the Carolingian age is going to be forming. So what conclusions can we draw from the map? What do you think? What can we think here? All right, go ahead, Chris. What do you say?
Basically, it's just the eastern, the western part of the Roman Empire that shattered.
Yeah, good job. So as Rome became so large, so big, protection became one of those key issues, right? And when it comes to trade. So as a lot of these Germanic-speaking tribes, these barbarians, these Islamic groups were emerging into Western Europe, well, that's where it kind of fell apart. Byzantine Empire is still intact, right? That's what's left of Rome. But feudalism emerges here in Western Europe with the fall of Rome. And you see all these kingdoms forming, okay? What's up?
Something on it,
Yeah, go ahead.
The tiny island named Corsica, right? There's no way that it'll get a world-class general and eventually he'll become dictator and beat everybody up for a while. No way that'll happen.
Oh, yeah? Who are you thinking of? Yeah, good job, Napoleon. We will talk about Napoleon here soon enough, but yeah.
There's no way that's happening. It's just all here.
Yeah, all in theory. All in theory. Yeah, we'll see if that.
So it's just with you. It might not happen. It might happen.
Why? I'm pretty surprised by you knowing that.
I know
That's
a lot of
some
stuff.
that's some good
There's
stuff.
There's somebody above the clouds, like every day, they're like, at the
Yeah.
end of the day, they're like, that's all, it's just theory. Okay.
But anyway, guys, we will eventually talk about nationalism. Listen up. We will eventually talk about nationalism and how these modern day countries emerge. So with Germany forming as a country, when France forms as a country, but that won't be for a little bit yet. With feudalism, okay, it's more of a local entity. So a lot of these local areas are forming their own kingdoms. There's more warfare, there's more bloodshed because there's many more, I guess you could say nationalities in a way. There's many more kingdoms emerging where there's going to be battle and fighting going on. All right, next slide here. Okay, so the medieval manor, this is what it kind of looks like here. As you can see, the manor house is focused, protected. It's more of a structure with fortification surrounding it. Okay, And we'll break it down even more here soon. But also we have the church, we have the priest houses over here. They have a heavy influence within the medieval manor during the Middle Ages, prompting a lot of social change, a lot of obviously power within these forms of hierarchy during the time. Okay, obviously you see how the food is laid out, land cultivated for the Lord. Okay, there's just strips of food just specifically for the higher class. Okay, and that just goes to show that a lot of the food supply is devoted and dedicated towards that higher class. If you're a serf, if you're a peasant, you might just get really the scraps of it. But again, you're doing kind of all the work for it. One thing to note is that you have roads. Yeah, you have a bridge here labeled. But for the most part, with these kingdoms, chances are transportation's dwindling a little bit. After the fall of the Roman Empire, really connection when it comes to communications amongst these kingdoms, it doesn't happen, right? You just are kind of restricted to your manor, to the group of people that you're associated with within your certain jurisdiction, and that's it, right? There's really not too much cooperation based off of that. Eventually, we will see that, okay, and that will build these modern countries that we know of, like France and Germany, so on and so forth. But for now, these kingdoms are secluded. Okay, they're really not trying to reach out and form trade ties or anything like that. All right, so what conclusions can you draw from the diagram about manoralism? What do we think? I kind of talked about it quite a bit here. I just broke it down for you. What do you think? What do you think? Anybody? Anybody? What are your ideas? Connor, go ahead.
The church has a big impact on the manor house.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. As you can see, the priests have their own house, right? These people within these medieval manors, okay, these priests have a heavy influence and they have their own home. Okay, you can't really say that about the peasants, right? You can't really say that about the serfs. Yeah, they might have their own form of house, but it's not as dedicated as the priest. It's not as dedicated as these positions when it comes to religion. Good, good. I'm glad you noticed that. Anything else? Go ahead, Paul.
Seems like these like trades, like blacksmith, with the set up.
Yeah, what do you say? They're all focused towards the manor, right? Yeah, good job, good job. A lot of these sources of materials, of goods, of food, it's all focused towards the manor. Good, awesome. The village is kind of on the outskirts, isn't it? Yeah, good. Anything else we can add there before we move on here? Okay. All right, so here's just another picture of what the manor would look like. Okay, as you can see, the church is really dead center. The peasants' homes are all kind of focused around this church because religion has a high priority within the community. Even today, like I mentioned not long ago, I think last week I talked quite a bit about it. Usually the center of each town, it's a church street. Okay, the church is focused directly right smack dab in the middle. And it's important, right? It's important to note that. And with medieval times, that's where it kind of emerges. That's where the church becomes this entity and bringing ethics, bringing rules to morals, values to the community. The manor house you can see is off to the side, but that's where a lot of these other forms of trades or other forms of goods, resources are focused. Because the Lord, they're getting a lot of the food. The king, they're getting a lot of the food and the materials first. All right, any questions on that here? All right, so again, that's just another idea of what this looks like, the medieval manor. Okay, we just talked about that. We're good to go. So feudalism, talked about this already. You guys know this social hierarchy already. You had the king at the top, you have the nobility, okay, you have the lords. The lesser nobility is what we know of the knights, the peasants, and the serfs. I don't think I have to focus on this too much, right? We kind of beat that up last week. Yeah, I think we're good. So where does the Pope go? Well, let's get to it here. Oh, here, let me just show a little bit of a breakdown of these kingdoms. So I might be the king here. Obviously I am. Here we are, we're in the class. Okay, the kings will then break up some of their power to the lords. As you can see, the lords are focused all across the kingdom to help out the king, right? Then we have our lesser nobility. We have our knights. They are there to protect these areas, these jurisdictions where the lords are located, okay? Then after that, we have our peasants, we have our serfs, and we might have it broken down even more depending on population, depending on growth throughout the kingdom. Okay, so again, this is just a way to try to understand how the kingdom's broken down because that's a huge chunk of land And the king, the monarch, needs a little bit of help from the lords when obviously ruling over that land. All right, so this is what a castle will look like when we move more into the higher Middle Ages. These fortifications get stronger because with feudalism, because of a lot of the people moving to these areas, well, they need protection for the people. They need some sort of support. So the castles would lead to large cities. And with these large cities, you need to try to protect it from a lot of these Germanic tribes, a lot of these barbarians that brought down the Roman Empire. So this is where we see the emergence of castles, of these fortifications. And real quick, I'll show you a video of that. Well, let me just talk about the church hierarchy first, and then we will move to the video kind of breaking down these manors. All right, so make sure you guys know this. There's another form of hierarchy here that's important to note. At the very top, you got the Pope. Okay, the Pope is a descendant of God, right? In other words, he is like God to earth, right? He is the God for the people on earth to follow. So yeah, he is appointed by God. If he dies, if he is maybe no longer able to serve the people in the kingdoms throughout Europe, well, it's up to the cardinals to choose who the next pope is. Okay, so the cardinals are your second in line. They really don't do too much. For the most part, they're appointed by the pope so that we can have a next pope in line. Okay, they don't really do too much other than choose the next pope. Okay, so with the cardinals, they are appointed by the current pope. So let's say one of these cardinals dies or no longer wants to be in the position. That usually never happens. But in any case, the pope chooses the cardinals. Once that pope dies or maybe is no longer able to serve, the cardinals that the pope appointed would then choose the next pope. So that's really what their power is. The bishops, okay, the bishops here are your regional leaders. So the bishops is, these people would kind of guide these kingdoms all throughout Europe. So we'll talk about the Frank kingdom. We'll talk about other kingdoms all throughout Europe. And the bishops are kind of guiding these kingdoms in the right direction for the religious sake, right? Does that make sense? What's that? Yeah, yeah. So with these bishops, okay, they are focused in a regional manner. They are appointing different priests to help serve some of these communities, some of these manors within the kingdom. All right, so the priests, again, they are your church leaders. So with the priests, they're appointing and they are asserting their power to these kingdoms, to these communities in smaller areas. Okay, so within these churches of these manors, you'll find the priests. And then finally, the monks and nuns, they are your people that really don't get paid, they don't get served. They are kind of going town to town, place to place, these rural areas, helping guide the people in the right direction for the power of the church. Okay. It's kind of interesting how they live, right? Their whole life is devoted to church and learning, understanding of God. Okay. They are pretty much wanderers. They wander kingdom to kingdom, place to place, trying to spread Catholicism, Christianity to Western Europe, and then eventually Eastern Europe. All right, is there any questions on that, guys? Is there any questions? So again, I didn't get to the manor. I apologize. We're running low on time here, but I'll talk about that more tomorrow. All right, guys. We'll see you later. Have a good one. Take care. Remember, that schedule's a little bit different.
Today's big week, right?
What's that?
Today's big week.
Ooh, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I'll take it.
I don't go